means it's hats off to the new year.
Yay!
2016, sweet 16. And we have here, we're going to do a verse show. I just found out about it. But we have none other than Phyllis Harmon, who regales us from distant Portland, comes down to do our show. You didn't know they travel that far. They do. And Phyllis said, she popped the question to me, why don't we interview you for a change? You do most of the interviewing and questioning. So I don't know what she's going to ask me, but I'm shivering in my boots.
Well, Lee, you've never shivered in your boots as long as I've known you. You've always had a ready answer for everything. Goes back to your past Toastmaster life, I'm sure.
Oh, even before that, my father used to tease me about having an answer for everything, even before the question was asked.
Well, that really puts you in good stead for this type of a program, doesn't it? Because you've always got something going on.
Mm-hmm.
But Lee, one of the things I want to know right off the bat is how did you get involved with television? What brought you to this?
Well, I've been a television consumer for most of my life, even black and white television. Let me go back to those days. When I lived on East 93rd Street in East Flatbush, Brooklyn, way back when, in the early 50s, I guess it was, television was just becoming a brand new phenomenon. And there was this store, and they were showing the first television, I think Milton Berle, Uncle Milton and all. And I remember people had their noses up against the windows. They were amazed. They were just standing out there in front of the store. It was a whole new era being born. But fast forward, I was a newspaper guy from 1963 onward. Began with the New York Voice in Queens, New York, later the Civil Service leader in the Long Island Post. And then I moved on to a second career in social work and therapy and counseling in Arlington, Washington, D.C. area. That's why I speak Espanol, worked with the Cubans at St. Elizabeth's Hospital. But during that time, I had to communicate a lot in 2 languages. And in addition, I was a journalist. I was writing for a social work newspaper on the side. And when I moved in 2002 to good old Salem, well, 13 years here now, almost 14, I did freelance writing. But journalism teaches you how to ask questions because you do interviews to get stuff from the subject for the story. And I've been doing that since the 1960s onward.
Well, let's go back a minute. You said something that really interested me.
What's that?
You said that in your very early career, you were a journalist for the New York Voice. Is that what I heard you say?
That's correct. That's the name of the newspaper, a weekly.
What did you write? Was it social commentary, which is what you do now, or what was it that you did?
That is a story in itself. I can't take the whole program of that, but what happened was I didn't drive at that point, and New York City is the Hollywood of writing, journalism, publishing, and all. So fresh out of college in '63, the year of Kennedy's assassination, I was looking for my first job in journalism. And the classified put me against heavy competition, people who were much more experienced and had a car, wheels to drive. I thought I'd start out as a reporter, cub reporter. And so a friend whispered in my ear and said, "Hey, Lee, I have an idea where you won't have much competition. Why don't you check the yellow pages under newspapers?" And that's what I did. And I went through the list alphabetically and sent out 4 or 5 resumes each week. And the first fish to bite was called the Old East Elmhurst Times, later became the New York Voice. And it happened to be a black middle-class newspaper. I, of course, am white, not black. And they interviewed me. And somehow they asked me a little bit about my knowledge of civil rights and the desegregation battles of that day and age. And I said, I think it began with Brown versus Board of Ed in the Supreme Court, where the Board of Ed in Kansas, Topeka, wanted the schools to stay segregated, and the federal government under Eisenhower wanted integrated schools and were challenging them. And Thurgood Marshall, later to become a Supreme Court justice, was the lead attorney for the NAACP, one of the main groups in that. And as a result, Mr. Drew, the publisher, was swept off his feet. He says, "How come a white guy like you knows all this stuff?" And he teased me. He says, "You're like a backwards Oreo," which means that you're white on the outside and black in the interior.
So from
That's how they tease.
that very beginning,
Yeah.
you have been in journalism and in social media of some time ever since.
Yes.
So now you're running your own TV shows, as it were, on
Correct.
cable TV.
Yeah, yeah.
What brought you to today?
Okay.
What brought you to being in a studio where you are sharing your life and everybody else's life with the world?
Ken Adams, who also does shows on this, had me as a guest once, and then I think there was one other show I was on with Michelle Dar, and I enjoyed being the guest on other people's show, and said, let me try my own show. And since my original specialty is gerontology, fancy name for dealing with the age of the future us, I'm almost there now.
Some of us.
I'm almost there now. And my future guest, Kaylee Ann, deals with some geriatric patients, but we won't get into that right now. So I decided to have a show which is now called Gray Matters, and it deals with problems of aging and also success stories of people who are retired but doing interesting, intriguing things with their retirement years. And that went well. And my dear friend Kanta, who is a writer of fiction, asked if she could market a little bit about her books to be. And so we started a second show called Our Awesome Authors. And we spread from there. I enjoyed it. And since I'm retired, at least I can't speak for all men, but it's satisfying to me to be an educator, a catalyst for the community. I do all this for free, no special fringe benefits.
Well, now you mentioned a very interesting word which pulls up all kinds of connotations.
What's that?
You said catalyst.
Yes.
For me, a catalyst is someone who connects people, who sets the spark and then watches it grow into something very awesome. Tell me about some of the catalyst type things you are involved in now.
Oh, now. Well, right now I am working with the UN Association and several other groups, including the City Commission on Human Rights, to make this a more welcoming community for our refugees of all ethnicities. They will include some Africans, some Arab Muslims, people from the old Soviet Union, now essentially liberated. And what we plan to do is probably the Wednesday after Martin Luther King Day, January 20th, exactly 1 year before the next president is inaugurated, ironically, we hope to have, probably in the library, a community forum on refugee resettlement. Catholic Charities is taking the lead on that, and we will be trying to get together a panel of people from different immigrant groups to share their stories about some of the trials and tribulations, why it's not as easy as pie to adapt to American culture and try to retain your own culture at the same time, and deal with people's prejudice who don't know, and they're just scared of differences.
That really sounds interesting. And since I heard the other evening that we've become such a pluralistic society where we have people from all over the world who have chosen to settle here. And I find that in the Willamette Valley, because it's such a growth area, that we are seeing a lot of immigrants coming in. And I think you're absolutely right. I think that some of the challenges that they have really do need to be addressed. And it sounds like you are putting together a group that does that. Are you looking for people to be on your panel or that can help you guys with this?
Okay.
Or?
One of the sideline things I'm trying to do, and I found out just earlier this week to my astonishment, because there have been veterans, soldiers, sailors, Marines, that have been in both Iraq and Afghanistan. Some of them speak some basic Arabic because they had to speak with the local population. So the idea occurred in my mind, gee, these guys are not getting to use their language, guys and gals probably too, in any meaningful way, and some of them are looking for work. It's a natural connection. Can we find out which veterans speak some Arabic and could be hired as ESL teachers or teachers' aides to teach English with a few basic Arabic words to the new immigrants, refugees from the Middle East. And they would be also culturally more hip because they have been part of that culture, visiting those countries, and they could help in cultural assimilation. So it's a win-win. It gives them a sense of new purpose, it recycles their knowledge. They would be friendly because they fought to protect these people from being overrun by Al-Qaeda and ISIS. I want to mention something about ISIS because this is just a sideline. ISIS stands for the Islamic State. I think it was very sneaky but misleading because they don't represent the Islamic mainstream religion. They represent radicals, jihadists. Think of when they had the war in Northern Ireland, if Northern Ireland called itself the Protestant state of Ulster. No, it's the same game.
It is
by
the
a
same
different
game,
name.
just different power.
Or the rest of Ireland called it the Catholic state of Erin.
Yep. Yeah, there really is no difference, is there?
So think of also if when we screened the Italians, immigrants coming into this country, that we had a vetting process to make sure that no people connected with the mafia snuck in. The mafia's a terrorist group. They've killed a number of people.
That's true.
Not all innocents.
That's true.
Should we not have vetted the Italians for the same reason?
I think they did. I was Italian.
Oh, you were? Oh, Mamma mia, Maron. Oh.
So
but you see the parallel and the double standard we're using.
Yeah.
And we don't want to admit having a double standard, but history shows that.
I don't think there is a culture anywhere that hasn't come across and dealt with the same type of issues that we find ourselves with now. It's just who were they against, who were they for? It's the same. Doesn't matter what culture you go into. I think you have those same issues. But let's segue a little bit.
Yeah, go
now, one of the programs that you're involved in that's close to my heart is gerontology, because I'm getting up there in age, and
really
I'm losing my mind. There's just several things that I can't remember to do anymore. So how did you get involved with that other than
I want
age
to tell you
related?
something about remembering things. Every night between dinner and going to bed, I try to make a list of things for the next day, and so that I don't forget it, I put it down on my breakfast placemat. It's a great way to start the new day, and it goes around the obstacle of memory loss, because when you wake up the next day, you're not all that with it, even with the first cup of coffee.
Oh, boy, isn't that true? That's why I think Post-it notes.
So it's self-communication.
There you go. That's why I think Post-it notes were invented, is for those of us who can't remember squat, so we write it down and put it somewhere where we can see it the next day.
Well, I have a different thing besides Post-it notes. I use envelopes that I would, from bills and stuff that I would otherwise throw out, so I recycle it before it dies.
Well, there you go.
Because that doesn't cost you anything.
So we've talked about your journalism career. We've talked about your social aspects of what you're doing. We haven't talked a lot about aging, but that's such a tender topic. That where do you see some of the challenges for the gray matter group you were talking about? What can we do as citizens of the United States, as it were, to help these folks?
In 1972, the Eagle magazine for the Fraternal Order of Eagles did me the honor of publishing my first magazine article called Project Emeritus. I'd like to resurrect that for the audience here in Salem, Kaiser, and Oregon. The idea was that people retire from their jobs with all their knowledge pretty much intact. On the other hand, the opposite age range, the teenagers, are still searching for what they want to do with their life, money-wise and satisfaction-wise. Why can't we unite the two and hire retirees who are willing to and able to come into classrooms and share stories about what it's like to be in their particular trade or industry. That's why I call Project of Merits recycled knowledge. And I think that's a great way the older people will feel they're still useful, and the younger people will feel, hey, somebody cares, somebody gives a damn, we're allowed to use that word on TV, somebody gives a damn about me and my future. It's a win-win.
There is a program similar to that for retired business people who go in and help entrepreneurs set up their business and learn what they need to do in order to be successful. So I see something like this as very doable, very doable, especially when you consider that storytelling is such a big part of who we are and what we do. Now, I think the challenge would be, if you're talking about the teenagers, is finding a group that has the time, because they're all so busy, to sit and listen.
This would be in the classroom.
Oh, in the classroom, sure.
Or you could even do it, have a special program in the library, or what have you. It's too big for an auditorium type thing, but even if it's done once a month. And you could also give students a choice of voting. Let's say they were given 8 different categories of potential speakers, and let them vote for the best 3. So that would be a practice voting in decision making, stuff like that.
It sure would.
And then they would, and what the other part of that is, what you could do is, I remember, Phyllis, that we were taken on tours. I remember to Recondary in Brooklyn, and to a firehouse. And even though it's 60 plus years later, I still remember they have a place in my memory, data bank up there. And I think it would be cool if retired people could get permission to go with a teacher and lead a field visit to their old places of work and show what it's like, beyond the literature and all. And of course, have a visitation day and talk with the people and all. And the other thing is, a retired person doesn't have to be as politically correct, because they can't be fired anymore.
There you go.
So they can talk openly about the pros and cons of the job situation. Because I think kids have to learn about the stresses of jobs, and not just simply that it's all,
One of the
beautiful.
One of the pieces of learning where this would come in really handy is, I don't remember when I went through my training in grade and high school that we got much information about how to handle finances, particularly how do we invest in the stock market, how do we make sure that we've got enough money to cover our budget, or what we spend. I always found that to be a real challenge until I got out there and overspent, and I learned very quickly what I should have done. But I never really got involved with the stock market. Nowadays, they got the 401k plans. I think that maybe some knowledge from people who have actually experienced what it's like, first off, to be successful, and those that are not, could really benefit.
Okay. Well, you have to begin with basic money management, how to keep a budget of your own house. And this is my legacy for the future to the people in Oregon and Salem and all, if it gets implemented, my pipe dream, impossible dreamer that I am. What if, when 2 people apply for a marriage license, that they were given the option, not required, to take a course in money management given at the local community college or library? Maybe they would be sponsored if they don't have enough money. But I think every couple that's merging households needs to have money management basics to learn how to deal with money and not let it go through their fingers.
Yes, that would be really good.
So that could be, and in it could be, not everybody is rich enough to play the stock market. We're talking about middle and upper classes, but not everybody is in that bracket quite yet.
Well, penny stocks, I've always wanted to find out more about those, and that was something that was quite big when I was a youngster, and I just never got involved with it. But I could have been a multimillionaire or not, based on what I chose.
You could have bought out the station here.
We've got just about 6-7 minutes left. I want to know, since we're talking about the new year,
Yeah.
we've already kicked the year off. What are your goals? What are you looking forward to happen this year?
Okay.
When you look at your vision, what do you see?
Well, I'd like to continue with the shows that we're doing. There are 5 of them. There's Gray Matters, there's Culturama, there's Let's Look at the Lyrics, there is Our Noble Globe, and there's one other I can't think of at the moment. But I want to invite guests out there who are retired people and have success stories. The other is awesome authors or other authors to come aboard. Contact me, Lucky Coyne, LuckyCoyne at yahoo.com. And if you know of anybody who could be a good potential guest who is either a writer or a retiree that has a story to share about an unusual hobby, or somebody who plays a musical instrument or does artwork in some way and is prepared to talk about it, come join me. The other thing is I'm working on a book right now. It's called Banterland, and it's how to be lighthearted, and I have about over a dozen different parts of it. It may include a little poetry, it may include some axioms, and I hope that it will be completed and the publisher will publish the same by the end of 2016.
So are you going to put some of your personal stories in there? That always makes things
No,
so
no,
much more
that's different.
interesting.
I have a second book I started to write in 1995 called Tales of a Tyke from Brooklyn. And I have everything from getting my first bloody nose to not wanting to dance in the 9th grade because I wasn't ready for women quite yet. And I told off the gym teacher that I wasn't mature enough to handle women then. Other things about my encounter with a yellow jacket biting me, etc. And the purpose of that book would be not only reminiscence, but for parents to understand how the mind of a kid works and all.
That's a really interesting idea.
I'm going to share with you one anecdotal story, a preview for the audience out there. Back in the old days, when you used to go on a long-distance train like the Long Island Railroad or Amtrak today, if you went to the bathroom, there was no environmental consciousness, so you just flushed and went right on the track. I, as a little kid, thought, well, if they do that in a train, they must do it with airplanes too. So every time bzzz, an airplane came overhead, I ran for the nearest awning. I didn't want to get people poop in my hair. It's a normal way to people poopophobia. Mommy, it wasn't a pigeon that dropped on me. But, and I have a lot of these little anecdotes and vignettes. And when you read the story, Tales of a Tyke from Brooklyn, you'll enjoy and laugh and roll over reading all these stories. So that's another thing I want to do. The third thing, if I can team up with somebody who is a playwright, I've always admired Sacagawea, the Indian guide for Lewis and Clark here in the Northwest. And I would like to see a play written. I don't know if I can do it myself, but I'd like to research on the Lewis and Clark expedition as seen through the eyes of Sacagawea, the one woman, a feminist view of Lewis and Clark, kind of. Something different.
I can imagine what that would be like. They probably had her doing washing and cooking and sewing as well as showing them the way. You know, that's kind of what women's role was.
Do you know in Sacagawea, Phyllis, that her husband was a drunk, an alcoholic, and when he used to drink too much whiskey, he got into a rage, and she gave the custody of the baby over to Captain Clark to protect the baby because she was afraid the baby would get hurt or even killed.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't
know
that.
Child abuse didn't begin in this day and age.
No,
and for you out there, that's something to keep watching. You know, protect yourself. Make sure your 2016 is a safe year. And if you're involved in a relationship or have a child involved in a relationship that's dangerous, inform the authorities quietly and all. And the kid you save may be your own.
Well, Lee, this has been really interesting. It's always such a pleasure to interview you because you have such a interesting background.
Really?
Interesting is a word that's overused. We talked about that.
Eclectic.
Eclectic. I like that word.
Life in the eclectic chair.
Very electric.
Eclectic chair. That should be the name of my biography.
Well, just to add a little bit to what you want to do this next year,
Yes. Tell us what you want to do.
I want to also be continue with Culturama. I think this is a fun time.
Yes.
And I appreciate the fact that you let me come on your show and co-host it with you.
A pleasure.
We have some interesting guests coming up in the new year.
Tell us.
I have a lady by the name of Jennifer Strait, who is very goal-oriented, has her own company.
Will she play it straight?
She plays it straight. And she's going to come and talk to us about goal setting in the new year.
Mm-hmm.
I've also got a couple of other people. I've got someone who has a coaching, mentoring business, and she mentors young people. So I'm thinking that might be something you want to talk about later. Oh, I've got somebody else for you that I need to bring to the show. She is 73 years old, and she is still ballroom dancing.
Young chick.
Yeah, or young chick. She is quite fantastic.
Let's do that in March. We'll call it Spring into Dancing.
Oh, I like that. I like that. I also have another lady who is a stay-at-home mom, but she has started a business for stay-at-home moms. She's appeared on AM Northwest a couple of times by the name, her name is Lee Coyne. She's written the book 1,000 Mitzvahs. She has a very interesting background, and I think that she would add a lot of panache to your show.
Oh, that's the
So
word you don't hear every
I'm
day.
bringing people down from Portland as fast as I can to appear on your
Portland
shows.
imports.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well, we've got about a minute left, Lee. How should we end the show today?
Okay. Communication is the art of connecting. We don't live in isolation, even when it's not icy. Make not a resolution, but make a commitment to yourself to upgrade your communication this year with your spouse, your significant other, your significant bother, your kids, your grandkids, whatever, and keep a smile in your heart with people that you meet, particularly customer relations people in the supermarket, in the hair parlor, whatever. You want to add to that?
I do. I would like people to think about checking out a Toastmasters club. That is my passion, my love, and I have found that it has made my life much more interesting and much more meaningful. Thank you for everything you've let us do today, Lee. I really appreciate coming on your show, and thank you for being the interviewee today. This has been fun.
The target, the victim. Okay. Signing off, and remember, Sweet 16 waits you. Year 16, wake up. Bye now.
Bye.